Steel Eel is just like Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point, except smaller and slower and much less aggressive, but it's still great.
I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them a review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster.
Steel Eel is the second oldest roller coaster at SeaWorld San Antonio. Opening in 1999, this D.H. Morgan manufactured ride focuses on one thing and one thing only: floater airtime. When it comes to sustained floater airtime, almost everyone thinks of B&M Hyper Coasters such as Apollo's Chariot and Mako, but Steel Eel actually predates all of the B&M Hyper Coasters. And I definitely think Steel Eel holds its own, even if it does have a couple flaws. An area in which Steel Eel is certainly not flawed is the stats. This ride has a height of 150 feet, a top speed of 65 miles per hour, a track length of 3,700 feet, which results in a ride duration of 1 minute and 2 seconds from the end of the lift hill till the beginning of the final brakes. Looking at Steel Eel's off-ride experience, this coaster looks amazing. Like several of the rides at SeaWorld San Antonio, Steel Eel has a nice, partially lakeside appearance. Steel Eel also towers over all of the other rides as it is the tallest in the park. Its appearance is tied nicely together with a relatively new purple and yellow paint scheme that is a nice contrast to the typical blues of SeaWorld coasters. And while this coaster does look great, it doesn't really have much by the way of theming, but it does have this really nice ride sign. Heading into the line for Steel Eel, you will need to make sure you put your bag into a paid locker before riding. In addition to the ride looking good, the queue area also looks quite nice with several trees and a wooden ride platform. But getting up to the station is where things get a little weird. The queue itself has a nice mix of natural and man-made shade, which is great, but for some reason the actual station platform itself does not. Also, the rows for this coaster aren't clearly marked, or at least not when I visited, and there are also no railings separating each row. So needless to say, this can be quite confusing and can get rather out of hand if there is no grouper organizing things in the station. But as far as where you should choose to ride, I personally much prefer the front, and I'll get to why in just a second. Once the gates open up and you take your seat, it will still be another minute or two before you get going. The restraint checks for Steel Eel require that all seatbelts are checked first, and then, on a separate pass, all lap bars have to get checked. So as you can imagine, this can increase the wait time quite a bit, but at least the restraints themselves are comfortable and minimalist, allowing you to enjoy all of the ride's airtime. So just be prepared for the ride to move a little bit slower due to these procedures. But once all the seats have been checked, you are finally ready for the on-ride experience. Steel Eel kicks off with a small dip out of the station and a left-hand turn into the lift hill. After a little over 30 seconds of climbing, you'll head into your first drop. And this drop is relatively mild for how tall it is, not providing much airtime, but it does pick up speed nicely, and it also offers fantastic visuals as you dive down towards the lake. The back row, however, does definitely get a bit more of an airtime sensation, but I honestly wouldn't say it's particularly enjoyable. As you can probably tell, the shaping of this drop is super wonky. It starts off with sort of a straight trajectory before deciding to become steep much later on in the drop than most coasters. This causes a majority of the rows to miss out on any airtime, while the back gets an abrupt pop before immediately throwing riders back down into their seat. And that's kind of why I just don't care for the back row all that much in general. The next two hills provide mild, sustained floater airtime to the entire train. And in the front row, even though it isn't the strongest airtime, I still absolutely love it because it lasts a lot longer than the back rows, and the restraints just allow you to float so pleasantly out of your seat. The back rows experience airtime similar to the first drop, and I much prefer staying out of my seat for longer over getting slightly stronger airtime that awkwardly chucks me back down into my seat right after leaving it. But I honestly know a lot of people that prefer this kind of airtime and like the back row of this coaster better, so to each their own, I guess. Now is also a good time to mention that the valleys of these hills don't really provide many positive G-forces. I mean, I guess they do, but it's pretty negligible. The bottom of the drops pretty much just serve the purpose of getting you to your next hill. But after those two camelbacks, you'll head into the mid-course brakes, and the transition up into these brakes actually gives the front of the train a tiny bit of floater airtime. These brakes do slow you down a tad, but I never found them to be particularly noticeable or affect the ride experience all that much. That's followed by a long, gradual, swooping turnaround that doesn't really provide any forces. The one good thing that I could say about this element, though, is that it does give you a good sense of speed at its lowest point as you're hugging the ground. You get back into some more airtime with the following hill that provides a very mild floating sensation before sending you into the awesome finale of the ride. And this is without a doubt my favorite part of this coaster. These are a series of small back-to-back airtime hills that provide the strongest airtime of the ride thus far. And it's honestly kind of similar to the airtime hill finale of Magnum XL 200, but instead of leg-snapping ejector airtime, you get fun, sustained, strong, floaty airtime. So honestly, for some, this might be a lot more enjoyable because it is a lot more comfortable. Even though the airtime is not the strongest through this section, it is pretty great how sustained it is, especially since these hills are relatively small. I feel like small airtime hills don't typically provide sustained floater airtime like this, so it's a bit of a unique experience in that regard. Now, once again, the airtime is a tad stronger in the back, but by now you probably know how I feel about that. The last little half hill provides one more moment of airtime for riders up front before you navigate a slow S-bend into the final brakes. So, what would I rate Steel Eel? 8 out of 10. I mean, I guess this ride is a little one note, as there's not really any forces other than airtime, but it does play that one note really well. And I think if you don't really care for the style of coaster that just hits hill after hill after hill, or if you like more aggressive airtime, you probably won't like this coaster as much as I do, but I don't know, something about it just makes me smile every time I ride it. As a matter of fact, I like this coaster so much that it sits at number 48 out of the 272 coasters I have been on so far. But I'd love to know what you guys think about Steel Eel in the comments down below. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this, and make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about